households, the champagne is rarely of first-rate brand.
Good heavens, is marriage so demoralizing as that?
Oh, I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I've had very little experience of it myself at the present. I have only been married once, and that was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a very young person.
I don't know that I am much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir. It's not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. That will do, Lane, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane goes out.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem, as a class, to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Enter Lane.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
Enter Jack. Lane goes out.
How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring anyone anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algie.
I believe it is customary in good society to take good slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
Oh,
Jack
in
sitting
the
down on the
country.
sofa.
What on earth do you do in the country?
Jack pulling off his gloves.
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbours.
Got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire?
Oh, perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
Oh, how immensely you must amuse them.
Goes over and takes sandwich.
By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Shropshire? Yes, of course. Hello. Why all these cups, and why the cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who's coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
Oh, how perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well, but I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
Well, I am in love with Gwendolen. I have come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you would come up for pleasure. I call that business.
Oh, how utterly unromantic you are.
I really don't see anything romantic in proposing. It is very romantic to be in love. There is nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe. Then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty.
Jack puts his hand out to take a sandwich. Algernon at once interferes.
Please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They're ordered especially for Aunt Augusta.
Takes one and eats it.
Well, you have been eating them all the time.
It is quite a different matter. She is my aunt.
Takes a plate from below.
Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
Jack advancing to table and helping himself.
And very good bread and butter it is too.
Well, my dear fellow, you need not eat it as if you're going to eat it all. You behave as if you were married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
That is quite nonsense.
No, it isn't. It is a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors who one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Rings bell.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algie, by Cecily? I don't know anyone by the name of Cecily.
Enter Lane.
Bring me that cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
Lane goes out.
Do you mean to say that you have had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you would let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to the Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
There's no good offering a large reward now that the thing has been found.
Enter Lane with the cigarette case on a salver. Algernon takes it at once. Lane goes out.
I think that is rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say.
Opens case and examines it.
However, it makes no matter, for now that I look at the inscription inside, I find that the thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times. And you had no right whatsoever to read what is written inside it. It's a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
Oh, it is an absurd thing to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of modern literature and culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I'm quite aware of that fact, and I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one should talk of in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. The cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily, and you said that you don't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady she is too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algie.
But why does she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt and lives in Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. The matter is surely that an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to have this idea that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt. That is absurd. Now, for heaven's sakes, give me back my cigarette case.
Follows Algernon round the room.
Yes, but why does your aunt call you her uncle? From little Cecily, with her fondest love, to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. But why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It's Ernest.
It isn't Ernest, it's Jack.
You have always told me it was Ernest. I've introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest. You look as if your name is Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking person I had ever saw in my life. It is perfectly absurd you're saying that your name isn't Ernest. It's on your cards. Here is one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany. I'll keep this as proof that your name is Ernest if you ever attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwendolen, or to anyone else.
Puts the card in his pocket.
Well, my name is Ernest in town, and Jack in the country. And the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small aunt Cecily, who lives in Tunbridge Wells, calls you a dear uncle. Come, old boy, you would much better have the thing out at once. Tell me the whole thing. I may mention that I have always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I'm quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by Bunburyist?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now produce your explanation, and pray make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle for motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited. I may tell you candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that, my dear fellow. I've bunburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear Algie, I don't know whether you'll be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It's one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to other one's health or to one's happiness, in order to get up to town, I've always pretended to have a younger brother of the name of Ernest, who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. And that, my dear Algie, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either. Modern literature, a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't be at all a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. You should leave that to the people who haven't been at a university. They do it so well in the daily papers. What you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you were a Bunburyist. You are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Ernest in order that you may be able to come up and down as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury in order that I'm able to go down into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at Willis's tonight, for I have really been engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. You're absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It is very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
Oh, you had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dined there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I'm always treated as a member of the family, and sent down with either no women at all or two. In the third place, I know perfectly well whom she would place me next to tonight. She would place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. It is not very pleasant. Indeed, it is not even decent. And that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It is simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you all the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolen accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him anyway. Cecily is a little too much interested in him. It is rather a bore. So, I'm going to get rid of Ernest, and I strongly advise that you do the same with with your invalid friend who has that absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever get married, which seems to be extremely problematic, you will be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
That is nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolen, and she is the only girl I've ever saw in all my life that I would marry, I certainly might want to know Bunbury.
But then your wife will. You don't seem to realize that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
Oh, that, my dear friend, is the theory that the corrupt French drama has been promoting for the last 50 years.
Yes, and that the happy English home has proved in half the time.
Oh, for heaven's sakes, don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
My dear fellow, it isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about.
The sound of an electric bell is heard.
Ah, that must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives, or creditors, ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I get her out of the way for 10 minutes, so that you can have an opportunity for proposing to Gwendolen, may I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Oh, yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. They're so shallow of them.
Enter Lane.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Enter Lady Bracknell and Gwendolen.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I am feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
Oh, that's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Sees Jack and bows to him with icy coldness.
Dear me, Gwendolen, you are smart.
I am always smart. Am I not, Mr. Worthing?
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
No, I hope I am not that. It would leave no room for development, and I intend to develop in many directions.
Gwendolen and Jack sit down together in the corner.
I'm sorry if we are a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Goes
Won't
over
you
to
come?
tea table.
Won't you come and sit here, Gwendolen?
Thanks, Mamma. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Algernon picking up empty plate in horror.
Good heavens, Lane, why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were No cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir, not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Goes out.
I'm greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumber sandwiches. No cucumbers, not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed its colour. From what cause, I, of course, cannot say.
Algernon hands her tea.
Thank you. I've quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I am going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She is such a nice woman and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I am afraid, Aunt Augusta, I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say a terrible disappointment to me. But the fact is, I have just had a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or to die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I am always telling that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice as far as any improvement in his ailment goes. I should be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury from me to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season when everyone has practically said whatever they had to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious, and I think I can promise you he'll be all right by Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen. If one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'll run over the program I've drawn out, if you'll kindly come into the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It is very thoughtful of you.
Rising and following Algernon.
I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think that they are improper, and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed, I believe, is so. Gwendolen, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mamma.
Lady Bracknell and Algernon go into the music room. Gwendolen remains behind.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else. And that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I have often had to speak to her about.
Yes. Miss Fairfax, ever since I've met you, I've admired you more than any girl I've ever met since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite well aware of the fact. And I often wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Ernest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Ernest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolen.
Passionately.
Oh, darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Ernest.
But you don't really mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest.
But your name is Ernest.
Yes, I know it is, but supposing it was something else, do you mean to say that you couldn't love me then?
Oh, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all in the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't much care about the name of Ernest. I don't think it suits me at all.
Oh, it suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolen, I must say I think there are lots of other much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, is a charming name.
Jack? No, there is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John. And I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. The only really safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolen, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once. There's no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. You know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you are not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolen.
Yes, Mr. Worthing. What have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Jack goes on his knees.
Gwendolen, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long have you been about it? I am afraid you have had very little experience in how to propose.
My own one. I've never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. Oh, what wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They are quite blue. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Enter Lady Bracknell.
Mr. Worthing, rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma! I must beg you.
tries to rise. Gwendolen restrains him.
I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon
They
me.
rise together.
You are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be. It is hardly a matter that she could be allowed to arrange for herself. And now, I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I am making these inquiries, you, Gwendolen, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma!
In the carriage, Gwendolen.
Gwendolen goes to the door. She and Jack blow kisses to each other behind Lady Bracknell's back. Lady Bracknell looks vaguely about, as if she could not understand what the noise was, finally turns round.
Gwendolen, the carriage.
Yes, Mamma.
Goes out, looking back at Jack. Lady Bracknell, sitting down.
You can take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Looks in her pocket for notebook and pencil.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men, although I have the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I am quite ready to enter your name, should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
I am glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes and probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That's all that can be said about land.
Oh, I have a country house with some land, of course, attached to it, about 1,500 acres, I believe, but I don't depend on that for any real income. In fact, as far as I can make out, the poachers are the only people who make anything out of it.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolen could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year to Lady Bloxham. Of course, I can get it back whenever I like at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham? I don't know her.
Oh, she goes out very little. She's a lady of considerably advanced in years.
Nowadays, that is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that could be easily altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. Are your parents living?
Oh, I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
I'm afraid I really don't know. Well, the fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I had lost my parents. It would be nearer to the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
Yes, the late Thomas Cardew, an older gentleman of a very charitable and kindly disposition, found me, and he gave me the name of Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
Where did the charitable gentleman who had a first-class ticket for this seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. I was in a handbag. A somewhat large, black leather handbag with handles to it, and in it, just an ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him by mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial. Mr. Worthing, I confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that reminds one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station might serve to conceal a social indiscretion. Has probably indeed been used for that purpose before now, but it could hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a recognized position in good society.
May I ask what you would advise me to do then? I need hardly say I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolen's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce at any rate one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I could possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It is in my dressing room at home. I really think that should suffice you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Lady Bracknell sweeps out in majestic indignation.
Good morning.
Algernon from the other room strikes up the wedding march. Jack looks perfectly furious and goes to the door.
For goodness sakes, don't play that ghastly tune, Algie. How idiotic you are.
The music stops and Algernon enters cheerily.
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolen refused you? I know it is a way she has. She's always refusing people. I think it is most ill-natured of her.
Oh, well, Gwendolen is right as a trivet. As far as she's concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. You don't think there's any chance of Gwendolen becoming like her mother in about 150 years or so, do you think?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That is his.
Is that clever?
It is perfectly phrased, and quite as true as any observation in civilized life should be.
I'm sick to death of cleverness. Everybody is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. The thing has become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had a few fools left.
We have.
I should extremely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The fools? Oh, about the clever people, of course.
Ah, what fools?
By the way, did you tell Gwendolen the truth about your being Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't the sort of thing that one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl. What extraordinary ideas you have about the way to behave to a woman.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Ernest?
Oh, before the end of the week I shall have got rid of him. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. It's a sort of thing that runs in families. You would much better say a severe chill.
You're sure a severe chill isn't hereditary, or anything of the kind?
Of course it isn't.
Very well then. My poor brother Ernest was carried off suddenly in Paris by a severe chill. Well, that gets rid of him.
But I thought you said that Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest. Won't she feel his loss a great deal?
Oh, that is all right. Cecily is not a silly romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She has got a capital appetite, goes long walks, and pays no attentions to her lessons at all.
I would rather like to see Cecily.
Now, I take very good care that you never do. She is excessively pretty, and she is only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolen that you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
Oh, one doesn't blurt these things out. Cecily and Gwendolen are perfectly certain to be great friends. I'll bet you anything you like. Half an hour after they've met, they'll be calling each other sister.
Women only do that when they've called each other a lot of other things first. Now, my dear boy, if we want to get a good table at Willis's, we really must go and dress.
Enter Lane.
Miss Fairfax.
Enter Gwendolen. Lane goes out.
Gwendolen, upon my word.
Algie, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Algernon retires to the fireplace.
Darling.
Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I ever had over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and very often, nothing that she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Oh, dear Gwendolen.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
Oh, the Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
Algernon, who has been carefully listening, smiles to himself and writes the address on his shirt cuff, then picks up the railway guide.
There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
My own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algie, you may turn around now.
Thanks, I've turned around already.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your carriage, my own darling?
Certainly.
Jack to Lane, who now enters.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
Jack and Gwendolen go off. Lane presents several letters on a salver to Algernon. It is to be surmised that they are bills, as Algernon, after looking at them, tears them up.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going Bunburying.
Yes, sir.
I shall probably not be back till Monday. You can put up my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and all the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
Handing sherry.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you are a perfect pessimist.
I do give my best to give satisfaction, sir.
Enter Jack. Lane goes off.
There's a sensible, intellectual girl. The only girl I ever cared for in my life. What on earth are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm a little anxious about poor Bunbury, that's all.
If you don't take care, your friend Bunbury will get you into a serious scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They're the only things that are never serious.
Oh, that's nonsense, Algie. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
Jack looks indignantly at him and leaves the room. Algernon lights a cigarette, reads his shirt cuff, and smiles. Act drop.
That is the end of Act 1, and we will take a short 5-minute little break. Feel free to utilize what you need to utilize or refill drinks as you may seem fit. So it is 8:44 right now, and we'll be back by 8:49. While you're waiting, I am going to attempt to share one of our new SBMT love notes. So do bear with me just a second while I put that up for you.
Hi, my name is Mike Rohn, and I am typically involved at SBMT as an actor, although I've also run sound for a few productions, and on one occasion also follow spot. Hi, I'm Mike Sands. Typically for SBMT, I'm a performer, but I've also been an assistant choreographer, dance captain, and crew. SBMT for me means high quality productions, but on a more personal level, it means people who are incredibly important to me. My dearest friends, a lot of them have come from SBMT, and it really does feel like a family.
I'll piggyback on that friends and family thing right there. But for me, it's not just an organization. They've actually allowed me to be on both sides of the table, both as a performer and creative staff. And that's really taught me a lot.
I have so many wonderful memories of roles that I've gotten to play there, but I think the things that stick out are the way that the audiences have responded to the shows that we've put on. And specifically, I think of when we did Les Mis back in 2013, and we were still 6 weeks out from opening and found out that we had sold out the entire run of the show, which is crazy and amazing and was such a blessing for all of us.
Yeah, I don't have a particular moment per se, but one memory that does pop in mind is when we did Thoroughly Modern Millie, which Leanne Payne directed. She was adamant that she wanted a cross-dressing couple in her production during Muzzie's party. And so the scene prior to that, I ran off stage, got full face makeup, wig, whole 9 yards, ran back out just in time to do the scene and the dance. And then after that was said and done, ran back off stage so that I could move flats and heels. So that was fun.
This company, and we want to continue loving it for decades to come. Thanks for the opportunity to share. Thanks.
So that was Mike Rohn and Mike Sands, who have been wonderful regular performers, and we're grateful for them for sending us a little love note. We will be back in just a minute or two with Act 2. It's hard to believe that our Thoroughly Modern Millie had just closed a year ago this past weekend, and what a wonderful show. We're glad that Jessica, who was our Millie in that production, you will see her in this next act coming up as Cecily. They're just getting ready now, and I think we are getting ready to go. So I'm going to turn it over to Raiña Parks and again the cast of The Importance of Being Earnest.
Second act, garden at the Manor House. A flight of gray stone steps leads up to the house. The garden, an old-fashioned one, full of roses, time of year July, basket chairs and a table covered with books, are set under a large yew tree. Miss Prism is discovered seated at the table. Cecily is at the back, watering flowers.
Cecily! Cecily! Surely such a utilitarian occupation as the watering of flowers is rather Milton's duty than yours, especially at a moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
Cecily coming over very slowly.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German when he is leaving for town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious that I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanour is especially to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. You might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I am sure you certainly would. You know, German and geology and things of that kind influence a man very much.
Cecily begins to write in her diary.
I do not think even I could produce any effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I am not sure that I would desire to reclaim him. I am not in favour of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so let him reap. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I really don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter all the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary that we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels that Mundy sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novels, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so, but it seems very unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript, unfortunately, was abandoned. I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child, these speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Casuble coming up through the garden.
Miss Prism rising and advancing.
Dr. Casuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
Enter Canon Casuble.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well?
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Casuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that and not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from town yet?
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes, he usually likes to spend his Sunday in London. He is not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as, by all accounts, that unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion, merely, drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I think, dear Doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational.
Goes down the garden with Dr. Chasuble. Cecily picks up books and throws them back on table.
Horrid political economy, horrid geography, horrid German.
Enter Merriman with a card on a salver.
Mr. Ernest Worthing's just driven over from the station. He's brought his luggage with him.
Cecily takes the card and reads it.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany West. Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Oh, yes, miss. Well, he seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He said he was anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come here. I suppose you had better talk to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
Merriman goes out.
I've never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I am so afraid he will look just like everyone else.
Enter Algernon.
He does.
Algernon raising his hat.
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You are under some strange mistake. I am not a little. In fact, I believe I am more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You, I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest, my wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, I am not really wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I am wicked.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you have not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Oh, of course I have been rather reckless.
I am glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention the subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, though I am sure it must have been very pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you are here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
That is a great disappointment. I am obliged to go up by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment that I am anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, I know, of course, how important it is not to keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life. But still, I think you had better wait till Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak to you about your immigrating. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh, well, the accounts I have received of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I am not that. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission, if you don't mind, cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
Oh, I will. I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse.
That is because I am hungry.
Oh, how thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first?
A Marichal Miel?
Picks up scissors.
No, I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Cuts a flower.
Because you are like a pink rose, cousin Cecily.
I don't think it can be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Oh, then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady.
Cecily puts the rose in his buttonhole.
You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
Oh, they're a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
No, I don't think I would care to catch a sensible man. I should know what to talk to him about.
They pass into the house. Miss Prism and Dr. Casuble return.
You are too much alone, dear Dr. Casuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope, never.
Oh, believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept as well as the practice of the primitive church was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up to the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive, except to his wife.
And often, I've been told, not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Enter Jack, slowly from the back of the garden. He is dressed in the deepest mourning with crepe hatband and black gloves.
Mr. Worthing!
Mr. Worthing?
This is indeed a surprise. We did not look for you till Monday afternoon.
Jack shakes Miss Prism's hand in a tragic manner.
I have returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Casuble, I hope you are well.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
Or shameful debts and extravagance.
Still leading his life of pleasure?
Dead?
Your brother Ernest, dead?
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him! I trust he will profit by it.
Oh, poor Ernest. He had many faults, but it is sad, a sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No. He died abroad, in Paris, in fact. I had a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, dear Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am peculiarly susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
No. He seems to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? I fear that hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the last. You would no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday.
Jack presses his hand convulsively.
My sermon on the meaning of the manor in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion, joyful or, as in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, on days of humiliation and festal days. The last time I delivered it was in the cathedral, as a charity sermon on behalf of the Society for the Prevention of Discontent among the Upper Orders. The bishop, who was present, was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
Ah, that reminds me. You mentioned christenings, I think, Dr. Casuble. I suppose you know how to christen, all right? I mean, of course, you are continually christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I have often spoken to the poorer classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you are interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any child, dear doctor. I'm very fond of children. No, the fact is, I would like to be christened myself this afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been christened already.
I don't remember anything about it.
But have you any grave doubts on the subject?
Well, I certainly intend to have. Of course, I don't know if the thing would bother you in any way, or if you think I'm a little too old now.
Not at all. The sprinkling, and indeed the immersion of adults, is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion! Yes.
You need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, or indeed I think it advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour would you wish the ceremony performed?
Oh, I might try it round about 5, if that would suit you.
Perfectly, perfectly. In fact, I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that time. A case of twins that occurred recently in one of the outlying cottages on your own estate. Poor Jenkins the carter, a most hard-working man.
Oh, I don't see much fun in being christened along with babies. It would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably.
Takes out watch.
And now, dear Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude any longer into a house of sorrow. I would merely beg you not to be too much bowed down by grief. What seem to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Enter Cecily from the house.
Oh, Uncle Jack! Oh, I am pleased to see you back. But what horrid clothes you have got on. Do go and change them.
Cecily!
My child, my child.
Cecily goes towards Jack. He kisses her brow in a melancholy manner.
What is the matter, Uncle Jack? You do look happy. You look as if you had a toothache, and I have got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother!
Who?
Your brother Ernest. He arrived half an hour ago.
What nonsense! I haven't got a brother!
No, don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he's still your brother. You shouldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll tell him to come out, and you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
Runs back into the house.
These are very joyful tidings.
After we had all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to me peculiarly distressing.
My brother is in the dining room. I don't know what it all means. I think it perfectly absurd.
Enter Algernon and Cecily, hand in hand. They come slowly up to Jack.
Good heavens!
Motions Algernon away.
Brother John, I have come down from town to tell you that I am very sorry for all the trouble I have given you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Jack glares at him and does not take his hand.
Good Jack, you are not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often.
Bunbury? Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or anything else. It's enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course I admit that the faults are all on my side, but I must say that I think Brother John's cordialness to me is peculiarly painful. I expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering it is the first time I have come here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never. Never, never, never.
Well, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
Shakes with Algernon and glares.
It's pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we might leave the two brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
They all go off except Jack and Algernon.
You young scoundrel. Algy, you must get out of this place as soon as possible. I will not allow Bunburying here.
Enter Merriman.
I've put Mr. Ernest's things in his room next to yours, sir. Suppose that's all right.
What?
Mr. Ernest's luggage, sir. I've unpacked it and put it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Ernest has been suddenly called back to town.
Yes, sir.
Goes back into the house.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I have not been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you go up and change? It is perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who is actually staying for a whole week with you in your house as a guest. I call it grotesque.
You are certainly not staying with me for a whole week, or a guest, or anything else. You have got to leave by the 4:05 train.
I certainly won't leave you so long as you're in mourning. It would be most unfriendly. If I were in mourning and you would stay with me, I suppose. I should think it very unkind if you didn't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you're not too long. I never saw anyone take so long to dress, and with such little result.
Well, at any rate, that is better than being always overdressed as you are.
If I'm occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by being always immensely overeducated.
Oh, your vanity is ridiculous, your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you have got to catch the 4:05, and I hope you have a pleasant journey back to town. This Bunburying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
Goes into the house.
I think it has been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything.
Enter Cecily at the back of the garden. She picks up the can and begins to water the flowers.
I must see her before I go. Oh, there she is.
Oh, I merely came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then have we got to part?
Enter Merriman.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
Algernon looks appealingly at Cecily.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
Exit Merriman.
I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you will allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Goes over to the table and begins writing in diary.
Do you rarely keep a diary? I'd give anything to look at it, may I?
Oh, no. You see, it is simply a very young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I hope you will order a copy. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I'm quite ready for more.
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I've dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily.
Enter Merriman.
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell it to come round next week at the same hour.
Merriman looks at Cecily, who makes no sign.
Yes, sir.
Merriman retires.
Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying on till next week at the same hour.
Oh, I don't care about Uncle Jack. I don't care for anyone in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy. Of course. Why, we have been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes, it will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you of course have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And of course a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Oh, darling. And when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or the other, and after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you. The next day I bought this little ring in your name, and this is the little bangle with the true lover's knot I promised you always to wear.
Oh, did I give you this? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given for your leading such a bad life. And this is the little box in which I keep all your dear letters.
Kneels at table, opens box, and produces letters tied up with blue ribbon.
Oh, my letters. But my own sweet Cecily, I've never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well that I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote always 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them, Cecily.
No, I couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited.
Algernon crossing to her and kneeling.
Oh, what a perfect angel you are, Cecily.
You dear romantic boy.
He kisses her. She puts her fingers through his hair.
I hope your hair curls naturally. Does it?
Yes, darling, with a little help from others.
I am so glad.
You'll never break off our arrangement, Cecily.
I don't think I could break it off now that I have actually met you. Besides, of course, there is the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You must not laugh at me, darling, but it had always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name was Ernest.
Algernon rises. Cecily also.
There is something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Ernest.
But, my dear child, do you mean to say that you could not love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Oh, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name of Algernon.
Well, my own dear, sweet, loving, little darling, I really can't see why you should object to the name of Algernon. It is not at all a bad name. In fact, it is rather an aristocratic name. Half the chops who get into bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name was Algie, couldn't you love me?
Cecily, rising.
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character, but I fear that I should not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, Your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in the practice of all the rites and ceremonials of the church?
Oh, yes. Dr. Casuble is a most learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
Oh, I must see him at once on a most important christening. I mean, on most important business.
Oh.
I'll be back in no time.
Kisses her and rushes down the garden.
An impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal into my diary.
Enter Merriman.
Miss Fairfax just called to see Mr. Worthing on very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. And you can bring tea.
Oh, yes, miss.
Goes out.
Miss Fairfax? I suppose one of the many good elderly women who are associated with Uncle Jack in some of his philanthropic work in London. I don't quite like women who are interested in philanthropic work. I think it is so forward of them.
Enter Merriman.
Miss Fairfax.
Enter Gwendolen. Exit Merriman. Cecily advancing to meet her.
Pray, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew.
Moving to her and shaking hands.
What a very sweet name. Something tells me that we are going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much after we had known each other such a comparatively short time. Pray, sit down.
Gwendolen still standing up.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolen, won't you?
If you wish.
Then that is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
A pause. They both sit down.
Perhaps this might be a favourable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You have never heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I am glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It is part of her system. So, do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
No, not at all, Gwendolen. I am very fond of being looked at.
Gwendolen, after examining Cecily carefully through a lorgnette.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose?
No, I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also?
No, I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I am Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh, it is strange he never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I'm not sure, however, that the news inspires me a feeling of an unmixed delight.
Rising and going to her.
I am very fond of you, Cecily. I've liked you ever since I met you. But I am bound to state that now that I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing a wish you were, well, just a little older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly...
Pray do. I think that whenever one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candour, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honour. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception. But even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the influence of the physical charms of others.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolen. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Oh, but it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Gwendolen sitting down again.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I am sorry to say they have not been on good terms for a long time.
Ah, that accounts for it. And now that I think of it, I have never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any Cloud had come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I am going to be his.
I beg your pardon?
Dearest Gwendolen, there is no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. Our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
Gwendolen, rising.
My darling Cecily, I think there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
Cecily, rising.
I'm afraid you must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
Shows diary. Gwendolen examines diary through her lorgnette carefully.
It is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would care to verify the incident, pray do so.
Produces diary of her own.
I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read in the train. I am so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I am afraid I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolen, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he clearly has changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have got into, I will never reproach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say that I have never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Enter Merriman, followed by the footman. He carries a salver, tablecloth, and plate stand. Cecily is about to retort. The presence of the servants exercises a restraining influence, under which both girls chafe.
Shall I lay the tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Merriman begins to clear table and lay cloth. A long pause. Cecily and Gwendolen glare at each other.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh, yes, a great many. From the top of one of the hills quite close, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in town.
Gwendolen bites her lip and beats her foot nervously with her parasol.
Quite well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
No, flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country if anybody who is anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
This is what the newspapers call agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy are suffering very much from it just at present. It is almost an epidemic amongst them, I have been told. May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you. Detestable girl, but I require tea.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cecily looks angrily at her, takes up the tongs and puts 4 lumps of sugar into the cup.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays.
Cecily cuts a very large slice of cake and puts it on the tray.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
Merriman does so and goes out with footman. Gwendolen drinks the tea and makes a grimace, puts down the cup at once, reaches out her hand to the bread and butter, looks at it and finds it is cake, rises in indignation.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
Cecily rising.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
Oh, from the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt that you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighborhood.
Enter Jack, Gwendolen catching sight of him.
Ernest, my own Ernest.
Gwendolen, darling.
Offers to kiss her. Gwendolen draws back.
A moment. May I ask if you are engaged to be married to this young lady?
Points to Cecily.
Ah, to dear little Cecily. Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Oh, thank you. You may.
Gwendolen offers her cheek.
I knew there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is at present round your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack? Oh!
Enter Algernon.
Here is Ernest.
Algernon goes straight over to Cecily without noticing anyone else.
My own love.
Offers to kiss her. Cecily, drawing back.
A moment, Ernest. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To what young lady? Good heavens, Gwendolen!
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolen. I mean to Gwendolen.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
Presenting her cheek to be kissed, Algernon kisses her.
I felt there was some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh!
The girls move towards each other and put their arms round each other's waist as if for protection.
Are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh.
Is your name really John?
I could deny it, if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked, but my name is certainly John. It has been John for years.
A gross deception has been practiced on both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet wronged Gwendolen.
You will call me sister, will you not?
They embrace. Jack and Algernon groan and walk up and down.
There is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, and so it is the matter of some importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolen, Cecily, it is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life that I've ever been reduced to such a painful position, and I'm really quite inexperienced in doing anything of the kind. However, I will tell you quite frankly, and that I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all. I've never had a brother in my life, and I certainly have not the smallest intention of ever having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
Never. Not even of any kind.
I am afraid it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl suddenly to find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
They retire into the house with scornful looks.
So this ghastly state of things is what you call Bunburying, I suppose?
Yes, and a perfectly wonderful Bunbury it is. The most wonderful Bunbury I've ever saw in my life.
Well, you've no right whatsoever to Bunbury here.
Oh, that is absurd. One has the right to Bunbury anywhere one chooses. Every serious Bunburyist knows that.
Serious Bunburyist? Good heavens!
Well, one must be serious about something if one wants to have any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about Bunburying. What on earth you are serious about, I haven't got the remotest idea. About everything, I should fancy. You have such an absolutely trivial nature.
Oh, well, the only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country quite so often as you used to, dear Algie. And a very good thing, too.
Your brother is a little off colour, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to disappear to London quite so frequently as your wicked custom was. Not a bad thing, either.
As for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I must say that your taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that is quite inexcusable, to say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
I can see no possible defence at all of your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolen, that is all. I love her.
Well, I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
Oh, there's certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew.
I don't think there is much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
Algernon begins to eat muffins.
Ah. How you can sit there calmly eating muffins when in the middle of this terrible trouble I can't make out. You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cuffs. One should always eat muffins quite calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
I say, it's perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
When I am in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, when I am in really great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately would tell you, I refuse everything except food and drink. At the present moment, I am eating muffins because I am unhappy. Besides, I am particularly fond of muffins.
Rising. Jack
Wait.
rising.
There's no reason why you should eat them all in that greedy way.
Takes muffins from Algernon.
Oh, I wish you would have tea cake instead. I don't like tea cake.
Good heavens! I suppose a man may eat his own muffins in his own garden.
But you have just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you under the circumstances. That is a very different thing.
That may be, but the muffins are the same.
He seizes the muffin dish from Jack.
Algie, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner. It is absurd. I never go without my dinner. No one ever does, except vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I have just made arrangements with Dr. Casuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Ernest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I made arrangements this morning with Dr. Casuble to be christened myself at 5:30, and I naturally will take the name of Ernest. Gwendolen would wish it. We can't both be christened Ernest. It's absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened if I like. There's no evidence at all I've ever been christened by anybody. I think it's extremely probable that I never was. And so does Dr. Chasuble. It's entirely different in your case. You've been christened already.
Yes, but I've not been christened for years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That is the important thing.
Quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. If you are not quite sure about your ever having been christened, I must say I think it rather dangerous you are venturing on it now. It might make you very unwell. You can hardly have forgotten that someone very closely connected with you was very nearly cut off this week in Paris by a severe chill.
Yes, but you said yourself that a severe chill was not hereditary.
It usedn't to be, I know, but I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements in things.
Jack, picking up the muffin dish.
That is nonsense. You're always talking nonsense.
Jack, you're at the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. There are only 2 left.
Takes them.
I told you I was particularly fond of muffins.
But I hate tea cake.
Why on earth do you allow tea cake to be served up for your guests? What ideas you have of hospitality?
Algernon, I have already told you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go?
I haven't quite finished my tea yet. There is still 1 muffin left.
Jack groans and sinks into a chair. Algernon still continues eating. Act drop.
And again, that is the end of Act 2. We'll take a quick 5-minute break. So I do have a 9:34 is our time right now. And we'll be back right here at 9:30 9:39. It's a palindrome. Do you have a moment if you need? I hear the lines at the restrooms are non-existent tonight. It's always helpful. So in case you were wondering, these cast members tonight are pulled from our most recent shows. So we have got Joseph Cloward and Melissa Jones, Barbara Heninger were all in She Loves Me. That was just closed past February. Michael Stahl and Michael Hirsch, you might recognize from Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder. Raiña Parks, our narrator, is from Big River. I have to check my notes. Jessica Maxey, as I mentioned already, was our Millie and Thoroughly Modern Millie. And Steve Allhoff and Jen Maggio, you might remember from The Hunchback of Notre Dame. They are wonderful contributors, and I'm so glad that they all volunteered tonight to help come out and produce the show for us tonight. Again, we've got one more love note for you, so I'm going to go ahead and share this. This is one of our performers tonight. Let me just hit the right button.
Hi, my name is Michael Paul Hirsch, and I am an actor for South Bay Musical Theater. I've done several shows with them, including The Bridges of Madison County, Big River, A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder, Broadway by the Decade, and others. I am also an acting instructor for their workshop series and a member of the board. As an amateur nonprofit organization, South Bay Musical Theater is the most professionally run theater company that I've had the honor to be a part of. Everyone that participates in their productions, whether you're in the audience or backstage, on stage, you're always proud of the work you do there. But most importantly, I've gained dozens of new friends, dear friends, that make me want to work harder. They inspire me, and I miss them. I miss you. I can't wait to see you again. But, you know, this pandemic has come, which has forced us to pause doing our main stage shows for now. And so we've put our efforts towards creating art and producing programming for the public and for ourselves through our new eStudio, where we'll continue to try to grow as an organization until we can see you again in the flesh doing our main stage shows. So I would ask that you please consider becoming a South Bay Musical Theater sustaining member and donate to keep theater alive in the Bay Area. We want to be there for you when the pandemic is over. So please consider donating. And until then, take care, stay safe, stay healthy. See you soon.
Thank you, Michael. So we will put information on how to access any donations. We are offering the eStudio with all of its wonderful classes to enrich, enlighten, and entertain. Those are complimentary to anybody this year as we pause our programming for the coronavirus until we find out how and when we're going to be able to come together again at the Saratoga Civic Theater. So I will include that in the information just in the chat, and you can always find that on our website, which is southbaymt.com. The eStudio is open to anybody, and all they need to do to get information on that is join our newsletter, our weekly newsletter, or we have a Facebook group. If you are on Facebook, that is SBMT's eStudio as well. So I think we are getting ready to start Act 3. I will let the actors know that it is places. Thank you all so much, and let's finish this off. Raiña, I will give it right back to you.
Third act, morning room at the Manor House. Gwendolen and Cecily are at the window, looking out into the garden.
The fact they did not follow us at once into the house, as anyone else would have done, seems to me to show that they have some sense of shame left.
They have been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't got a cough.
They're looking at us. What effrontery.
They're approaching. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. It's the only thing to do now.
Enter Jack, followed by Algernon.
Oh, better far to live and die, under the brave black flag I fly, than play a
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, I have something very particular to ask you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolen, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have an opportunity of meeting you.
Cecily to Gwendolen.
That certainly seems a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't. But that does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. It matters of grave importance. Style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it in order that you might have an opportunity of coming up to town to see me as often as possible?
And you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
Gwendolen moving to Cecily.
Their explanations appear to be quite satisfactory.
I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrief said. His voice alone inspires one with absolute credulity.
Then you think we should forgive them?
Yes. I mean, no.
True. I had forgotten. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. Which of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Could we not both speak at the same time?
An excellent idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as other people. Will you take the time from me?
Certainly.
Your Christian names
are still an insuperable barrier.
That is all.
Our Christian names?
Is that all?
But we are going to be christened this afternoon.
Gwendolen to Jack.
For my sake, you are prepared to do this terrible thing?
I am.
Cecily to Algernon.
Please me, you are ready to face this fearful ordeal.
I am.
How absurd to talk about the equality of the sexes. Where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
Clasp hands with Algernon.
They have moments of physical courage of which we women know absolutely nothing.
Gwendolen to Jack.
Darling.
Algernon to Cecily.
Darling.
They fall into each other's arms. Enter Merriman.
Lady Bracknell!
Good heavens!
Enter Lady Bracknell. The couple separate. An alarm. Exit Merriman.
Gwendolen, what does this mean?
Merely that I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Come here. Sit down. Sit down immediately. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young, of physical weakness in the old.
Turns to Jack.
Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin, I followed her at once by a luggage train. Of course, you will clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolen, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now, as regards Algernon. Algernon.
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
May I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
Oh, no. Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury is somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
Oh, I killed Bunbury this afternoon. I mean, poor Bunbury died this afternoon. The doctors found out that Bunbury could not live. That is what I mean. So Bunbury died.
He seems to have had great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. I am glad, however, that he made up his mind at the last to some definite course of action and acted under proper medical advice. And now that we have finally got rid of this Mr. Bunbury, may I ask, Mr. Worthing, who is that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is now holding in what seems to me a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
The lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
Lady Bracknell bows coldly to Cecily.
I am engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon.
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
Lady Bracknell crossing to the sofa and sitting down.
I do not know whether there is anything peculiarly exciting in the air of this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that go on seems to me considerably above the proper average that statistics have laid down for our guidance. I think some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected with any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desire information. Until yesterday, I had no idea that there were any families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Jack looks perfectly furious, but restrains himself.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square Southwest, Gervase Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran, Fifshire, N.B.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. So far, I am satisfied.
How extremely kind of you, Lady Bracknell. I have also in my possession, you'll be very pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both the German and the English variety.
Ah, a life crowded with incident, I see, though perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I am not myself in favour of premature experiences.
Rises, looks at her watch.
Gwendolen, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I had better ask if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, about £130,000 in the funds, that is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
Lady Bracknell sitting down again.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000, and in the funds. Miss Cardew seems to me a most attractive young lady, now that I look at her. Come over here, dear.
Cecily goes across.
Pretty child. Your dress is sadly simple, and your hair seems almost as nature might have left it. But we can soon alter all that. A thoroughly experienced French maid produces a really marvelous result in a very brief space of time. Kindly turn round, sweet child.
Cecily turns round completely.
Algernon.
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Oh, Cecily is the sweetest, dearest, prettiest girl in the whole world, and I don't care 2 pence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that.
To Cecily.
Dear child, of course you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend upon, but I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I was married to Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never dreamed for a moment of allowing that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Cecily kisses her.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may also address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
To speak frankly, I'm not in favor of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of finding out each other's character before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
I beg pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot marry without my consent until she comes of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I may almost say, an ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. What more can one desire?
It pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you, Lord Bracknell, about your nephew, but the fact is that I do not approve at all of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible. He is an Oxonian.
I fear there can be no possible doubt in the matter. This afternoon, during my temporary absence in London on an important question of romance, he obtained admission to my house by means of the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, I've just been informed by my butler, an entire pint bottle of Pierre Jouet Brut 89, wine I was specifically reserving for myself. Continuing his disgraceful deception, he succeeded in the course of the afternoon of alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stated he devoured every single muffin. And what makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he was perfectly aware from the very first that I have no brother, that I've never had a brother, and that I don't intend to have a brother, not even of any kind. I distinctly told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I have decided entirely to overlook my nephew's conduct to you. Come here, sweet child.
Cecily goes over.
How old are you, dear?
Well, I am really only 18, but I always admitted 20 when I go to evening parties.
You are perfectly right in making some slight alteration. Indeed, no woman should ever be quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties. Well, it will not be very long before you are of age and free from the restraints of tutelage. So I don't think your guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray excuse me, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting you again, but it is only fair to tell you that according to the terms of her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come legally of age till she is 35.
That does not seem to me to be a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the very highest birth who have, of their own free choice, remained 35 for years.
Algie, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively. But I couldn't wait all that time. I hate waiting even 5 minutes for anybody. It always makes me rather cross. I am not punctual myself, I know, but I do like punctuality in others, and waiting even to be married is quite out of the question.
Then what is to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
My dear Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait till she is 35, a remark which I am bound to say seems to me to show a somewhat impatient nature, I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But, my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will most gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
Lady Bracknell, rising and drawing herself up.
You must be quite aware that what you propose is out of the question.
Oh, then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself.
Pulls out her watch.
Come, dear.
Gwendolen rises.
We have already missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more might expose us to comment on the platform.
Enter Dr. Casuble.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
The christenings, sir? Is not that somewhat premature?
Both these gentlemen have expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age, the idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. I will not hear of such excesses. Lord Bracknell would be highly displeased if he learned that that was the way in which you wasted your time and money.
Am I to understand, then, that there are to be no christenings at all this afternoon?
I don't think that as things are now, there'd be much of practical value to either of us, Dr. Casuble.
I am grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. However, as your present mood seems to be one peculiarly secular, I will return to the church at once. Indeed, I have just been informed by the pew opener that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. I am on my way to join her.
Pray allow me to detain you for a moment. This matter may prove to be one of vital importance to Lord Bracknell and myself. Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies, and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been for the last 3 years Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
In spite of what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches. She is nigh.
Enter, Miss Prism, hurriedly.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I have been waiting for you there for 1 hour and 3/4.
Catches sight of Lady Bracknell, who has fixed her with a stony glare. Miss Prism grows pale and quails. She looks anxiously round as if desirous to escape.
Prism! Come here, Prism!
Miss Prism approaches in a humble manner.
Prism, where is that baby?
General consternation. The canon starts back in her. Algernon and Jack pretend to be anxious to shield Cecily and Gwendolen from hearing the details of a terrible public scandal.
28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104, Upper Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, through the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight, standing by itself in a remote corner of Bayswater. It contained the manuscript of a 3-volume novel of more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day you mention, a day that is forever branded on my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag in which I had intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction that I had written during my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction, for which I never can forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you deposited the handbag that contained that infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
Which railway station?
Victoria. The Brighton line.
Sinks into a chair.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolen, wait here for me.
If you are not too long, I will wait here for you all my life.
Exit Jack in great excitement.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect, Dr. Casuble. I need hardly tell you that in families of high position, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. They are hardly considered the thing.
Noises heard overhead as if someone was throwing trunks about.
Oh, Jack seems strangely agitated.
It has stopped now.
The noise is redoubled.
I wish he would arrive at some conclusion.
Oh, this suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Enter Jack, with a handbag of black leather in his hand.
Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it very carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
It seems to be mine. Yes, here is the injury received through the upsetting of a Gower Street omnibus in younger and happy days. Here is the stain on the lining caused by the explosion of a temperance beverage, an incident that occurred at Leamington. And here, on the lock, are my initials. I had forgotten that in an extravagant mood I had had them placed there. This bag is undoubtedly mine. I am delighted to have it so unexpectedly restored to me. It has been a great inconvenience being without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more is restored to you than this handbag. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes! Mother!
Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried!
Oh, unmarried? I do not deny this is a serious blow. But after all, who has the right to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out the act of folly? Why should there be one law for men, another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. There is the lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell. I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
I am afraid that the news I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother? But then I have a brother after all. Oh, I knew I had a brother. I always said I had a brother, Cecily. How could you have ever doubted that I had a brother? Dr. Casuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolen, my unfortunate brother.
My own. But what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you have become someone else?
Oh, good heavens. I had quite forgotten that point. Your decision on the subject of my name is irrevocable, I suppose.
I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolen.
And the question had better be cleared up at once. Aunt Augusta, a moment. At the time when Miss Prism left me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, had been lavished on you by your fond and doting parents.
And I was christened. That is settled. Now, what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot at the present moment recall what the general's Christian name was, but I have no doubt he had one. He was eccentric, I admit, but only in later years. And that was the result of the Indian climate and marriage and indigestion and other things of that kind.
Algy, can't you recollect what our father's Christian name was?
My dear boy, we were never even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
His name would appear in the army list of the period, I suppose, Aunt Augusta.
The general was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life. But I have no doubt his name would appear in any military directory.
The army list of the last 40 years are here. These delightful records should have been my constant study. M. Generals, Malum, Moxblum, oh, what ghastly names they have. Marksby, Migsby, Mobbs, Moncrief, Lieutenant 80, 1840, Captain, Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel General. 1869, Christian names. Ernest John. Huh. I always told you, Gwendolen, my name was Ernest, didn't I? Well, it is Ernest after all.
Ernest, my own Ernest. I felt from the first that you could have no other name.
Gwendolen, it is a terrible truth for a man to find out suddenly that all his life he's been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you forgive me?
I can, for I feel that you are sure to change.
My own one.
Letitia!
Embraces her.
Frederick! At last!
Oh, Cecily!
Embraces
At last!
Gwendolen!
Embraces her.
At last!
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta, I've now realized for the first time in my life the vital importance of being earnest.
Curtain.
We're going to have the cast just introduce themselves and take a little bow, and then we'll open it up for any questions. Take it away, Steve.
Thank you all. I'm Steve Allhoff.
Thanks, I'm Joe Cloward.
Thanks, I am Barbara Heninger.
Hi all, I am Michael Paul Hirsch.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Melissa Jones.
I'm Jen Maggio. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all. I'm Jessica Maxey.
I'm Raiña Parks. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. I'm Michael Stahl.
It's all my fault. I acted it.
That was Walter Mays, who was our director. Thank you, Walter, and thank you, cast. And thank you all for joining us tonight. We're really appreciative that you were here. I hope you enjoyed it. Do note that if you're interested in what else is coming up on the eStudio, do check our website. That is www.southbaymt.com, and you can find all the information. Our next up is on Monday, Broadway by the Decade. It's musical theater history. This one is going to be early musical theater all the way up until the 1930s. So thank you all for coming. We greatly appreciate it. If you do have any questions, feel free to chat, or you can unmute yourself and turn on your video, and we're happy to chat for a little while. And thank you, thank you. That's all I have to say. It was really nice to see everybody here tonight, and we had a record attendance of over 105 on our counter tonight. As we look ahead, we are looking at other shows on the docket. We've reached out to a couple local directors to kind of pick shows, particularly shows that might be off of our beaten path a little bit, some new and different. We're working with rights houses to acquire those rights, and hopefully we'll be able to present a wonderful virtual season for everybody this year.
Jack, are you eating the muffins?
Finally.
I got a little jealous when I saw that. I was like, oh man.
Muffins. Now I want to go eat muffins.
You guys just finished one of my favorite plays. Thank you so much.
You can come on video and say hello.
Hello.
Hi. Hi, Elise.
I'm chilling on my sofa.
Yay.
Good.
I have a question for Walter and the company, which is, how was the rehearsal process? How convoluted was it? Did people rehearse in pairs and trios? How did all that work?
Rehearsals were not difficult. We did a read through. Then I did some work with individuals and groups in pairs. And then we did a dress rehearsal. If you have good people, they will do the work. And the hardest part for, I would say, half of them was the dialect. I mean, Ernest is unfortunately one of those plays that really wouldn't work if you didn't do dialect. So everybody just had to like step up and do the work. And so a lot of my notes were just dialect notes. Say this line this way, say this word this way. And they incorporated it and did it. Very, very lucky that we had actors that know how to do this kind of thing. Wildean rhythms are distinct. They're very particular, and you have to do them the right way. Ernest isn't one of those plays that you can just sort of say, oh, we'll just experiment with. You really can't. You have to do it the way it's intended. And luckily, they all came sort of understanding that. And then if they didn't quite understand it, I'd feed them the thing that they needed to know. And yeah, it's 140-year-old writing, very, very British, and Wilde creates characters who speak in epigrams, and that's not natural, and you have to learn to speak in that unnatural style in order to make it work, especially if you're either Algernon or Lady Bracknell, because they're such iconic roles. If you're Jack, you get to be a more ordinary person, and that's a little bit easier. So yeah, it went very well and very quickly.
I think all the characters speak with parenthetical phrases. So they go along and then they have parenthetical thoughts in the middle of their speech. So you have to figure out where you want to pitch that so that the audience can tell, oh, that's a different thought, and that's a different thought, and that's another thought.
Yeah,
It seems like
a lot of the time. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it seems like you cast Barbara and then everything else just falls into place.
Now, do you want to know my model for Lady Bracknell?
Oh, yes, of course.
Walter Mays.
Of course.
I just imagine, what would Walter do if he was Lady Bracknell? Because I know that I'm really lucky that I got to do it and it wasn't him in drag.
I did the same thing. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, how would Walter do Gwendolen? Yes.
I think that should be your motto forever now. What would Walter do?
What would Walter do? I have a hand up from Elaine. Do you have a question, Elaine? Are you out there?
Yes, I do have a question. So I attended online the Foothill College Theater play reading, the first one, and they did it in webinar format. So how did you decide to do it in this regular Zoom format, and how did it work out for you? I mean, I as an audience member, I really liked it because then I can interact like right now, because webinar format, I cannot interact with anyone else.
That is, essentially it comes down to what account we have. So our Zoom account is just basic right now. So we hit our max tonight, which was kind of cool. And we are experimenting with this, and I'm looking at the webinar stuff, but this time I didn't use the chat tool very much, but we've done other things where we'll use the chat tool for little bits of history, Oscar Wilde's background, or any information on the play itself. We've used that before. We kept it pretty quiet tonight, though.
I really like this. I also liked the use of the background, since the Foothill College performance did not use the virtual backgrounds, and I thought this worked out really well.
Oh, great. Thank you. We are talking with some of our set designers for the future for upcoming productions. These have just been images pulled off of that fabulous invention, Google. And however, we're talking with some of our set designers who are itching to design something to maybe put in some personalized backgrounds for our upcoming productions.
That sounds great.
Yeah, I'm hopeful.
It is a little bit disconcerting when you're doing it that you don't get any audience reaction. So you just have to focus on it's like a radio play, only then you have to also well, you always have to engage your face even in a radio.
The hardest thing for me in the Zoom sessions is not, you can only kind of look at the camera. It's hard to know where the other people's boxes are because everybody gets set up on a different way. That would be my request to Zoom. If there's anybody who's got a tech in at Zoom, please let me know. I would like to be able to move people around so that I can put them in what order we want.
So when I was viewing it now, or earlier during the actual performance, I had it in full screen mode, so I only saw one person at a time.
Oh yeah. We have also found that viewing in gallery mode, and then if you hide all the non-video participants, really makes that, you can see a couple people at a time, and it kind of gives that impression of conversing.
So the Foothill College did that in their webinar mode. They had all the speakers on the screen at the same time.
Cool.
Yeah, the issue with Zoom is you have to set that yourself, which is a little bit more awkward.
Being an audience member this time, I was like really enjoyed the little grouping at the top and everybody's reactions to the dialogue.
Oh, interesting.
I really liked having the gallery view.
Oh. And then I might pronounce this wrong, but Biji just noted down in the comments too, she's watching from Wenatchee, Washington. One of the things that I've really loved about all of our experimentation over this format is being able to connect with people that are farther away from us than we normally would. I know there's a couple people from LA out here. Jessica Maxey's.
I'm in Portland right now.
She's up in Oregon. So it's been one of the fun things. So we've got an LA. I know we've touched base with some of our friends who live in Texas, a couple people up in Oregon. So that's been a blessing. Steve, are your parents on? I thought I saw an Allhoff. Are they?
I believe all parts of my family had dialed in. So mother, father, and sister were all somewhere in the house.
Oh, there they are.
The other nice thing about it is recorded. And so my dad, who is not a Zoomer, I will just say, here's the recording, Dad. You can go watch it at your leisure.
Say my family are all way farther east, so it's too late for them right now to watch, but they'll watch tomorrow.
I will always apologize for missing the first minute or two. Sorry. Someday I'll remember to do that. Get it going early.
So I first started actually ushering for this group probably in about 2010, I think, when I lived in San Jose. And then I've just been up here in Washington for a year. But when I get back down there in the fall, I've always, been back down there to usher again. So, and my kids were always in the shows. So.
Oh. That's awesome.
Walter knows that, right, Walter?
Beige is Carl Schweitzer's mom. And,
yep.
Yeah.
I met
she's
Carl.
Been around for a while.
I met Carl for the first time during She Loves Me. He is a gem. He is.
Especially with cookies.
He feeds us cookies. That's the thing. Yeah,
He was actually in shows when he was in high school, and I started ushering. I was teaching at Lincoln High School, and he was attending there, and that was when John Healy did the summer shows.
Okay.
So he was in those then, and that's when I first started ushering.
Well, thank you for coming and joining us tonight. That worked great.
the other thing that's interesting about this is that we all basically just have to make up our own costume. So Lisa, we miss you coming to help. But I love Raiña's hat. I still love Raiña's hat.
My 5-year-old let me borrow it. And I have to say I loved your hats too, Lady Bracknell. They were amazing.
Oh yeah, and Jen's hat.
Do you already just have the hats?
No, so Sarah dropped off this shawl that kept kind of revealing Gwendolen through the show, but and also the hat. So just a couple of things.
This is my hat, and the other one is also my hat. I bought them both at Tabard Theater auctions, and this is my 1960s suit. Wow. Anyway.
So our rehearsal studio also houses our costume storage area, and we do have hats going back. Well, I guess our hunchback costumes would be circa 1400s. Is that right? All the way up to modern day. So it's been fun searching for top hats, and I have a little straw boater hat in my car. But it was fun pulling the ones for Jen to consider this week. She had 3, and they're just giant.
I chose the biggest one.
Right. That was the one that I think she's probably gonna like this one the best.
Joe, how'd you do your collar?
Well, it's I just had a white tie, but unfortunately we had problems with my background, so it ends up just being transparent.
He has a magical.
Looks like you have your neck's transparent.
It's a magical collar.
Exactly. Yeah, matches my teeth.
I think that just means you have very white teeth, which is great.
Yeah.
Super clean. Super clean. Here's the little background too, or what I am laughing at. We have people that are, let's see, Michael Hirsch, are you in your little closet, your games closet? Jen Maggio was in her bathroom, did this from the bathroom. I hope I'm not embarrassing anybody.
In my game man cave, I guess, but you can't tell because I'm putting up my green screen.
Yeah.
So
there's the secrets unveiled, or secrets revealed.
Yeah, I've blockaded half of our office, so my husband has to like walk around the other side of this to get to his desk.
Pretty sneaky. Well, thank you guys. Again, you have, I'm writing any suggestions or any other comments that you want to say, please feel free to reach out for me. Any ideas on additional programming, we love to hear that, especially as we are just building these programming. We have a lot of exciting sessions coming up, including cabaret nights. We're working on a trivia night. We're working on games nights. We've got workshops based for performers on acting and headshots and dance classes coming up. So there is a ton of material coming down the pike, and we hope to see you at as many of them as we can. And some of you hopefully will be presenting as well. I'm like, oh, hi, Lisa and May. I would love to do a panel on costuming. That would be super. So I'll be reaching out for that too. Thank you all so much. Have a great night. And I think that's all. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, I lost my thing.
Good job, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night. All right, I'm ending it. I'm ending.